Hello and welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all here today, whether you're coming into us live from around Australia and elsewhere you might be, or whether you're watching the recording later. Great to have you here for our 46th Holding Space for Self and Others. Today we have a very popular presentation. We've had almost 100 enrolments for this, which has been wonderful, bringing nature-based interventions into professional and personal practice with Kit Klein. I'm going to introduce Kit in just a moment. I know you'll be very keen to meet her and hear about her extensive experience and great background in working in this space. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging around this wide land we find ourselves on, and a special welcome to any Indigenous colleagues here with us today. Welcome one and all. My name is Jackie. I'm the Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar series for you. Just some practical tips today. If you haven't joined us before, I can see many familiar faces, so welcome to those who are regular participants in this webinar. If you're not familiar, if you could keep your cameras on, that's really wonderful for the presenter to be able to see your engagement in the work that we're doing today. And if you have a pen and paper, that will be wonderful for some interactive exercises we're going to be doing, or maybe some art materials that you might like to use for your own reflections in some of the processes that we're doing today. So you can share as much or as little as you'd like, but we would really like you to be actively involved in this learning experience today. So if you've got some way of reflecting, you can just think obviously, but if you've got some drawing, art materials, pen and paper at minimum, that would be wonderful. Kit Klein, the founder of nature-based therapy, is a descendant of the Wamamko people on her paternal side and is a member of the Sioux West Nova Métis Council. Kit has always felt a strong connection to her Indigenous ancestry and believes her philosophy on health and wellness derives from this connection. Kit is a social worker with over 20 years experience specialising in mental health and addictions. She established the modality nature-based therapy after the success she was having with the people she was working with when she incorporated nature into her work practice. And we're very excited to welcome you, Kit, here today.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. We've got a wonderful response here, and I'm really happy to be presenting nature-based therapy. It's something I'm extremely passionate about. The presentation I'm going to take you through today, I'll just share my screen now, is going to be interactive. So I want you to, as I'm going through the different slides and bringing out concepts of nature-based therapy, I'd like you to be reflective and really think about how you would apply this both in your professional and your personal practice. So you'll be able to learn some skills today that you can work with your own clients or bring into your own life for self-care and your family's life as well. So today's presentation is bringing nature-based interventions into professional and personal practice. And it doesn't matter what role you have. The processes and concepts today you can apply to any environment, to any person, pretty much anywhere. And it's a complementary therapy, so it can be used along other interventions as well. So I also would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today I'm presenting from Wadawurrung country. I'm down on the surf coast of Victoria. So you've had a little bit of an introduction about my history, especially around my work experience and my academic training. So it is quite holistic. I started off in this field over 20 years ago, but at the age of about 12 years of age, I always wanted to be a social worker. And I've always been very passionate about social justice and environmental justice. I'll give you a little bit of a briefer background. I'm from Canada, and I moved to Australia when I was about 8 years of age. I came out to Australia with my mother and my 3 siblings. I had no idea I was coming to Australia. I was pretty much uprooted from my friends, my family, and my connections there. So one thing that helped me ground and settle into a new country, for me, it was nature. Nature was something that helped me find connection wherever I went in life. And so I just wanted to put a little bit of context behind why I work with nature and why nature is so important for me personally. It's something I've always had a connection with from a very young age. We grew up in Vancouver, which is a city, but at the back of our house, we had a forest. And so we had a gate. We spent many, many days, summer and winter, picking berries, skating on ponds, making mud cakes, making tree houses. We were always outdoors. And I think it was a really important part for me to connect to nature, to work with my emotional health, my mental health, when I had relocated to another country. And it was also bringing nature was something that authentically just came to me in my work as a youth worker and working in different settings in Aboriginal health or mainstream community health. I worked in detoxes and rehabs, and I was fortunate enough to live in or work in spaces that allowed nature connection. Or if there was no, forest to work with or rivers to be near, we would bring nature into the workplace. We would bring in pot plants, and we would find nature, because nature is everywhere. You don't have to just go to the beach. You don't have to go to the forest or the river to find nature. Nature is in us, and it's all around us. So part of my experience of bringing nature-based interventions into my work as a drug and alcohol worker and as a social worker and a youth worker, we would take clients on walks and stop and look at nature. We would go kayaking and canoeing. We would do lots of different activities out in nature. And what I found is that clients really connected more to themselves. But it also helped with building rapport and relationship building as me as the therapist and working with the client. It wasn't in that four walls clinical setting. People tended to open up more and connect more. So I found that very valuable. And I'll talk a little bit more about the connection to Indigenous ways of being and doing and why that's important as well. So what is nature-based therapy? Nature-based therapy is a complementary therapy. So we're recognised with the International Institute of Complementary Therapies. We deliver training in the 39 countries internationally, both in person and via distance education. It's complementary because it really works well with any other therapies out there. Even clinical therapies such as cognitive behavioural therapy, solution-focused therapy, motivational interviewing, you can really bring it into any therapeutic setting. And what it does is it enhances self-awareness through nature connection. So the whole concept is that nature is the therapist, and we're working as co-therapist with nature. And when we enhance our self-awareness through nature, we're really looking at we are nature as humans through Indigenous philosophies. We are nature. We're not separate from the natural world. So when we work with nature and we observe nature and we understand nature, it's kind of like looking into a mirror. And so we begin to understand parts of ourselves and parts of our world and the world that we live in and how it works. It's a trauma-informed process that can be facilitated indoors or outdoors. So some of the processes that I developed, nature-based therapy, is kind of like a psychotherapy and using metaphoric wording, looking at that connection to metaphors and observing nature. You don't always have to go out to nature. Nature-based therapy encompasses 8 modules, and these are concepts that we use in nature-based interventions. We look at holistic health. We incorporate Indigenous philosophies, nature-based mindfulness, nature journaling, nature-based diet. We look at gut health and the connection between gut health and mental health and the importance of a healthy ecosystem in the gut and how that plays out in other parts of our body, really important. We look at creative arts. We look at using the right side of our brain and looking at imagination, creativity, and really tapping into our intuition, finding our strengths, finding answers through intuition. We incorporate holistic counselling and self-care. And I'll go more into these through this presentation, and we'll incorporate some reflection time. So who can benefit from nature-based therapy? Well, pretty much everyone. Nature-based therapy can be used in all kinds of settings. So we work with people in aged care facilities, youth work, kindergartens. We work with LGBT community. We work in Indigenous communities. We work in mental health, drug and alcohol. Nature-based therapy can pretty much be used in any setting with anyone. It helps us to regulate emotions. It helps to improve mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And it helps to relieve anxiety by bringing in the concept of grounding and really grounding within the body. So a lot of nature-based interventions are not working with the mind, but it's actually working with the body and what's happening within the body. It acknowledges compassion, fatigue, and vicarious trauma as well. So as healthcare workers, as therapists yourself, it's really important that we take check of our own well-being. And we can bring in nature-based interventions to look at, how do we assess that? How do we assess where we're at before we get to fatigue and burnout and stress? What are the warning signs? How do we know within our body that we're getting to that moment in time? What are the experiences or the symptoms that are presenting? What's happening beneath those symptoms? And really checking in with that. That's really important that we check in. It also creates self-awareness to understand one's thoughts and behaviours through observing the natural world. And so that's where we bring in nature journaling as well. And we'll talk more about that. So the key concept of nature-based therapy is really reconnecting to your authentic self through the process of a trauma-informed practice. And when we reconnect to our authentic self, well, what is our authentic self? And so when we look at authenticity, it's our blueprint. Who are we at the time of birth? And what is formed in the process of who we are today? Is it through our lived experiences, through trauma we've experienced, through the roles we've taken on, through our environment and what's been role modeled to us? We are shape-shifted into becoming something, but are we that person? Is our authentic self our job? Is it our gender? What is our authenticity? And we also have disconnection that takes us away from living our authentic self. A lot of shoulds. I should be doing this. And as a social worker, something I'm very passionate about is looking at our society and the impact our society has on our own mental health and well-being. So much mental health diagnosis at the moment, and people identify themselves as being their diagnosis, but that's not their authenticity. And are we as humans just trying to adapt to an unwell society? One thing I did in my early 20s was I traveled a lot. I traveled around the world. I lived in different countries, and I especially was interested in learning about different cultures. And when I went to different countries and I learned about different cultural differences, we didn't have, high mental health or high suicidal rates or physical illnesses like the Western world. So I looked at what was happening, what were they doing different? And they all had a deep connection to nature. They were self-sufficient. They had generations of family living together. There was a sense of connection and community. And so I really see the importance of connection to self and connection to nature. And when we look at connection and what connection brings us, I want you to reflect now on your own personal connection. When we're connected to nature, when we're connected to self, we're connected to family, we're connected to community. You know, what are some of the things we have? Are we happy? Do we have gratitude? Do we trust? Are we more forgiving? Does it bring more passion into our life and motivation? Are we inspired by the work we do? Is it supportive? Do we become more responsible? What happens when a person is disconnected? What happens when they're disconnected from nature, disconnected from self, disconnected from their community, disconnected from family? Is there stress that presents? Do people become worried? Is there a sense of fear and anger and uncertainty? Are we authentic, or do we come across as being fake? Do we become jealous of other people? Do we have less motivation and become lazy? Is there a sense of sadness? Do we complain about life and everything that's going wrong instead of celebrating what's going right? So this image represents and can be an indicator of when we are connected and when we're disconnected. What's happening? Where is the lack of connection, and how can we build connection? So if you're experiencing any of the things under the ego part, we might be looking at where's the disconnection? And we have time to explore that when we go through the holistic health model. So I just want to look at evidence-based theories, because a lot of people say, well, how can nature-based therapy be valid? Where's the research? And there's actually a lot of research that shows the benefits of connecting people to nature. And one of them is the tension restorative theory, otherwise known as ART, from Kaplan and Kaplan. So their research has shown that spending time in nature provides us with the opportunity to rest, reflect, and restore ourselves. It improves in mental fatigue and concentration. This is just a snapshot. There's a lot more research around that. And from Ehrlich, there's also the PET theory, psychoevolution theory, that humans have evolved psychologically and physiologically within the natural environment, therefore can relieve stress much faster when they are in nature rather than cities. So it's through our biophilia. So the biophilia hypothesis, humans possess an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. Psychological mechanisms that cause emotional and cognitive changes in the nature-based therapy process include, that sense of beauty, wonder, and awe. And so I'd like you to take some time now just to reflect on maybe, when was the last time you were on holidays? Where did you go when you were on holidays? Did you take a break to the city? To buildings, to rest and relax and restore yourself? Or did you go for a walk on the beach? Did you take your family camping? Did you hire an Airbnb or a cabin in nature? Where are you drawn to when you feel overwhelmed with life? Is it the busy life of a city? Or do you intuitively and innately go to a restful, relaxing, natural environment to find wonder, to find awe, and to find a sense of beauty? So just giving you some time to reflect on your last holiday, or perhaps where you're wanting to go on your next holiday. Where do you go to get that sense of beauty, wonder, and awe, to restore yourself? So I'd like to talk about the holistic health model that we use in nature-based therapy. We look at 8 dimensions of wellness. A biomedical approach to healthcare really looks at the mental and physical, the connection between the mind and the body. But there is so much more to us as humans than just the mind and the body. We look at the 8 dimensions of wellness, and we really want to look at the importance of having all these 8 parts in balance. You might be looking at the image here. So this is an activity and process that we do called My Ecosystem. And so as I'm talking through this, I would like you to go through the different parts, and I'll guide you through them. But one of the things you can do after that is get, a sketch pad and some colored pencils. And what we do is we metaphorically speak. We put the concepts of the 8 dimensions of wellness into a picture, into an art piece that represents that. So someone's emotional health might be represented as a cyclone. It could be represented as suppressed emotions in the clouds that are unable to be released. Maybe some of them are released through pain and letting go. Maybe there might be some anxiety and sadness that are repressed within our bodies that we hold on to. And what does that represent? The lightning strike means I can't breathe. And what about the foundations of your life? What were they like? Looking at the roots of a tree, there's some wounds and scars, there's some fears there. But it can also represent strength and growth. We look at the things that keep us strong and keep us connected, and they might be our family and our ancestors. Healthy finances might be represented through a tree and the growth of a tree in a forest, that you've planted intentions and you've got great investments and savings, and therefore you've grown a forest. Could be represented as a home. So using imagery and creative arts to represent, what does your ecosystem look like? Your own personal ecosystem, incorporating the 8 dimensions of wellness. And part of what we do with holistic health, we look at doing a holistic health assessment. I do a holistic health assessment with every person I work with. I want to know about their emotional health. What is it that's working for you? What is it that's good in your emotional health? And you can write this down as we're talking. What is good with emotional health? What are your strengths? What would you like to improve on? And sometimes I'll ask people to give it a rating out of 10. Where do you see yourselves? Is it a 6? Is it a 7? Spiritual health. I believe spiritual health is the foundation of all health. This is deeply embedded in Indigenous philosophy. If you don't have a spiritual connection, it's very hard to build upon other parts or lay a very shaky foundation. Spiritual health is about your spiritual connection. And that can be found through connection to nature and connection to self and connection to ancestors. Spiritual health is not, we don't say it is connected to religion. Religion's a belief system based on teaching. Spirituality for us is more about that inner knowing that no one teaches you. It's just something you know and something you're really connected to. Where do you find that connection? Is it through your creative arts? Is it through music? Is it through nature? What is it that gives you that sense of deep connection Intellectual is mental health. So how is your mental health? What is great for mental health? Do you have positive thoughts? Are you an optimist? Are you motivated to get up in the mornings? Are you passionate about what you do? How does that affect your mental health? Is your mental health lacking? Do you need more clarification? How is your mental health? That's your thoughts. Are they positive thoughts? Are they challenging thoughts? Is there self-doubt? How would you represent that in a drawing, perhaps? And physical health. How is your physical well-being? Your nutrition, your diet, your water intake, your sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you moving every day? Are you stretching? Are you drinking enough water to keep hydrated? Our physical bodies are very much like nature. Everything in our body is represented through the natural world. The earth is 70% water, so are our bodies. So we need the same water intake. What would happen if the earth became dehydrated? It wouldn't be able to function, and neither can we. Hydration is very important for our cellular body. Environmental health. Environmental health can mean a connection to the natural world. It can also mean, is our environment healthy? Are we exposed to pollutants and toxins? Is our air quality good? Where do we live? It can also mean our relationships. How's the environment we live in? Are our relationships healthy? Our home relationships, our friendships, our relationships within our workplace? Do we work in a healthy environment? Do we have enough natural light coming in? Do we take breaks? Our financial health. How's our financial health? Are we in a job that we love, that we're doing with purpose? And that's connected to occupational health. The two come together as well. Do we earn enough money to be able to live? Or are we stressed? Do we need more money? Or do we have enough money, but we just need to change our lifestyle and reduce our consumption? How can we improve our financial health? Our occupational health. Are we happy in our jobs? Is it our purpose? Is occupational health connected to spiritual health? Are we doing something we're really passionate about? Or are we in a job just to pay the bills, to keep the financial going? Just to live week by week, trying to survive with a roof over our head and food on the table? And if we are, how does that impact our physical health? And our intellectual health, and our spiritual health, and our emotional health? You can start to see the interconnection between all parts of health. If you're in a really unhappy job, all other parts of health are really going to be affected. So when someone comes to you with a mental health issue or problem or presentation, is it really about mental health? Or is it about social health? Who are their connections? How is their social life? Where do they find meaning and connection? Through their connection to other people? Are they lonely? Do they feel isolated? And so when we really look at connecting all these parts of the 8 dimensions of wellness, really look beyond and deeper than what's actually presenting to you. What's really happening. I hope that's given you enough time just to reflect on those parts of the self for you, but it's something to take away from today, and maybe keep working with that. I invite you to do a drawing, to get your sketch pads and colored pencils out, and using nature as a metaphor, create your own ecosystem. How is it interconnected? How do they support each other? What might need more support? And how can those other parts, the strengths of the other parts, support the other parts that might need the support? Nature-based mindfulness is another practice that we do, and we encourage to bring this into any other interventions you might be doing with nature-based therapy. It's one of the foundation modules that we work with and processes. And it's really about allowing us to get into the body and out of the mind. I find when I work with clients, the first thing they do is they just want to blurt everything out. But I think it's really important that we get people into the body to settle those emotions and to really work with what is laying beneath the mental presentation. So nature-based mindfulness allows us to connect to our sensory system. And when I say sensory system, we're looking at our 5 senses. It helps us to regulate emotions and our heart rate, be in the present moment. So we're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. It's really about being in the here and now. And it allows us to tune in and be fully aware. And when we look at senses, we're looking at, our sight. What can I see? What can I smell, taste, touch, and hear? And I really like to start off with inviting clients to close their eyes and inviting you to close your eyes. Most of you are inside at the moment. I can see you're inside buildings, but if you're outside, I see one participant is outside. If you can, I invite you to close your eyes and just connect to your hearing. What can you hear? And even if you're inside, I invite you to do this. What can you hear? Can you hear birds outside? Can you hear the rustling of leaves? Can you hear the wind? What can you smell? Are there flowers around? You have lavender. You might have a slow cooker going on inside and cooking up some beautiful, beautiful veggies. Nice vegetable soup for winter. It's the first day of winter. What can you smell? And just tuning into your senses, your hearing and smelling, and inviting you to tune into taste. You might have a cup of herbal tea. Again, that's connecting to nature through herbs, having a cup of herbal tea, or even coffee. Coffee is from nature. What does it taste like? You might have some fruit with you, some morning tea, tasting fruit. So we've got hearing, smelling, tasting, and we have touch. Can you touch a plant? Do you have a natural object around you? Might be a crystal or a stone, an indoor plant. Can you touch nature? What does it feel like? And then we invite people to open their eyes and look at what you've been experiencing through the other senses. And how is it different having your eyes closed first? And then fully experiencing them in the body before you see what you're experiencing. So this is a process that you can do with people outside. It might only take 5 minutes, where you go through the sensory system and guide them through that, and then get them to open their eyes and fully look at what's happening. And then what it does, when we connect to our 5 senses, it really helps us to drop into our 6th sense, which is our intuition. And that's where we solve our problems. That's our inner knowing. That's our spirituality. That's our connection. And women are really good at connecting to intuition. But intuition can also be hard to connect to if you're disconnected. Sometimes a lot of self-doubt or, how many times, I want you to reflect, how many times have you thought something, to do something or not to do something, and your intuition was either right and you didn't follow it. You're like, I just knew that. That's your intuition, but you didn't follow it because your logical mind overrid it. Or has there been a time in your life when you followed your intuition and I'm glad I listened to that? What's your gut saying? And our gut brain is our second brain. 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. There's more melatonin produced in the gut than there is in our brain. So our gut brain is really important. And that's where we hold our intuition. And we can get to our intuition by connecting to the other 5 senses. And that helps us get to our 6th sense. So when you're trying to make a decision in life, I invite you to go out and connect with nature and tune into your senses, drop into your 6th sense. Before you make a decision, ask yourself, does it feel right? And usually your intuition's spot on. Another process connected to nature-based therapy is nature journaling. And I always invite people to do nature-based mindfulness before nature journaling. It is that connection to nature. It's how we observe the natural world. And it's really about looking at what can nature teach us through this observation, and then how can we apply this teaching to our life. So we won't do this process here today because we're all online, but I do invite you, perhaps after this presentation, that you can go outside. And it might just be in your front yard or backyard. And find yourself a nice place to sit, a comfortable place, do your nature-based mindfulness, and open your eyes and just watch nature. Just sit there and watch nature for 20 minutes. And look at how it's moving. Look at what it's doing. How are the birds interacting? How is the tree responding to the wind? What life is going on around you? Just watch it. And what is it teaching you? What does nature teach you? Is it teaching you patience? Does it teach you the importance of communication? Does it teach you that we adapt and respond to our environment? Does it teach you about acceptance? And if there's something that you might be struggling with in life right now, how can you apply that teaching to your situation? What teaching can you get? Nature has a lot of teachings if only we take the time to be still and listen. It's all about listening with our senses and giving ourselves permission to slow down. And creative arts. Creative arts is a wonderful way to bring nature-based interventions into practice. It's really about being fluid. It's about adapting. It's about flexibility. It's about imagination. So it really is about tuning in, again, tuning into our senses, tuning into nature. It allows our creative thoughts to arise, which are great for finding solutions to problems, being innovative. It also reminds us to tune into our inner child and play. As adults, we become, respondent to stresses in life. I have to do this. We need to do this. But we forget how to play. And we forget to take care of ourselves, and we forget to have fun. So creative arts is a wonderful way to tap back into that inner child that didn't have responsibilities, that inner child that was allowed to use their imagination. And that imagination was never second guessed. It allowed us to tap into our intuition as well. And some ways we can do creative arts is just to be in nature, walk in nature, and intuitively pick up things that have fallen from nature. Might be a feather that's fallen or some leaves. It's a great time of year at the end of autumn now that, there's a lot of fallen leaves. To pick them up and play with them and be creative. It might be you get some Posca pens and do some artwork on fallen leaves and make a collage. It might be that you just make a mandala with anything that's fallen around you. And you might take a photo of that and then just leave it and let it stay in nature. We don't have to take nature. And I always invite people to ask permission to take anything from nature if you are going to remove it. Never to remove it for something that's connected to its life force. So never pulling anything off a tree, but only taking anything that's fallen. Asking permission. Does it feel right to take this? And then gratitude. If it feels right, thanking Mother Earth for taking, for giving you that as a resource for your own healing or for healing for other people. Showing gratitude is really important. And this picture here is a workshop that we did where we made photo frames. So we went out to nature and we did some nature photography. One person, we invite people to put their nature photography in the photo frame, or they can continue using the resources to put that into the frame to make a picture. And that's just picking up different parts of nature and putting it onto the photo frame. And that's something you can keep for yourself, or you can gift it to someone. You can do that as a gift. I like inviting people to make gifts and take them into aged care facilities for older people who can't get outside. And they might be restricted to being indoors. How can we give back to community that can't get out to nature? Can we make them things from nature and then donate them to aged care facilities? So that might be a little idea that some of you might have for a project or a program. And then looking at having a mental health care plan. And so a mental health care plan is really about looking at how do I self-care while caring for other people? And this might be a mental health care plan that might be done for yourself, or it might be done for a family member. It might be done for a client that you have, someone that you work with. So it's about reflecting upon the 8 dimensions of wellness from the holistic health model that we looked at, and then developing that personal ecosystem. Drawing out, what is that ecosystem? What does my ecosystem look like? How is it in balance? And not only is this helpful for the person doing it, because it creates self-awareness around what's out of balance, but it's really good for you, perhaps as the therapist, to look at what's happening. It's a really holistic way of doing an assessment. Doing an assessment of a person's mental health and what's beyond the mental intellectual presentation. What else is happening in that person's life that we need to address, that we need to bring back into balance in order for our mental health to improve. And the other thing is to take 20 minutes a day to spend in nature. This can be actually really quite challenging. So part of the training course that I run a 12-month advanced accreditation in nature-based therapy. One of the modules we do is nature journaling. Students have a whole month to do nature journaling. That's the whole month is just nature journaling. But the biggest challenge to doing the nature journaling isn't sitting there for 20 minutes trying to get into the body and observe nature without mental distractions. It's actually taking the 20 minutes out of the day to do it. And time can be quite challenging in the Western world and the world that we live in our society. It's pretty hectic. And I understand myself. I've got 4 kids. I'm up in the morning, doing school lunches, rushing off to school, coming home, working, school pickup, after school activities, dinner, bedtime. When do you take 20 minutes a day out? Do you get up half an hour early before you start the day? Do you take 20 minutes before you go to bed to go outside and sit in nature? So nature can be accessed 24/7. That's the great thing about it. You can do nature-based mindfulness at nighttime. You can watch the stars. You can observe clouds, especially if it's a full moon, watching the clouds move and shift and change and looking at how the wind moves the clouds. You can observe the moon. There's lots of different ways we can connect to nature at nighttime. Listening to the animals, to nocturnal animals, finding out what life is alive at that time when humans go to sleep. Is it in your lunch break? Can you take 20 minutes a day at work to go for a walk around the block, or even just a 5-minute walk and have a 10-minute sit spot where you just observe nature, 5 minutes for eating your lunch? So what we want to do is try and incorporate the 20 minutes into your normal daily activity. It's just about being mindful. So we can go for a walk for 20 minutes with our headphones on and our shoes on, but we're not connecting to nature. We're listening to a podcast, we're listening to music, we're thinking about what we need to do. Can we take our shoes off and go barefoot in a park? Or sit and enjoy our lunch and really taste our lunch, especially if it's made with natural ingredients, like a salad sandwich or some soup, or it could be a piece of fruit. We can connect to nature and do nature-based mindfulness just by eating an apple. What does it sound like when I bite into it? Does it crunch? What does it smell like when the juices come out? What does it taste like? What does it look like as I'm biting through it? How is the shape changing? So we really can connect to nature in so many different ways in just our everyday life. It's just about being mindful of when we are connecting to nature, because nature is all around us and it's in us. It's about finding wonder and awe through nature connection, not just seeing nature as a commodity, not seeing nature as my lawns need to be cut, my lawns and my garden need to be manicured to look pretty. But how can we really observe nature in our yard when we're gardening and look at the bug life, look at how what we've planted is taking shape. Looking at the chaos of nature too. Why do we need to control nature and own nature? Just accepting nature as it is and then accepting ourselves as we are. Finding wonder and awe through who we are as human beings, through ourselves and our identity and our connection and our purpose. Finding wonder and awe through the work that we do. And planting a garden and tend to it daily is a great way to connect to nature on a daily basis. And you don't have to be a green thumb to be able to garden. It might just be getting a pot and some soil and putting in a seedling. You don't have to grow it from seed. And watching how it grows. And how does a garden grow? What does it need to grow? What does a plant and a seed need to germinate and grow into a healthy plant? Well, we can connect that to ourselves as humans as well. It needs a supportive environment. Companion planting is really important with gardening, and it is with us too. Who are our companions? Are our foundations stable? Do we have good soil? That's our environment. Are we working and living in a healthy environment? Sun and water. What do they represent in your life? Is it hope? Is the sun hope? If we wake up with hope every day and sun every day, does that help us grow? And water? What's water? Releasing of emotions, taking check of our emotions and our mental well-being. Does that help us to grow? Or can it be the support of other people as well, and allowing people to help us and not having to do everything on our own? Inviting supports of people. And then the importance of not forgetting to create and play. Making that part of your daily life. To create and play in nature. And getting back to our inner child and who are we? Who are we as humans? Why do we do what we do? So I want you just to reflect for a moment of how can you implement nature connection through your day? What are some things you can do to take that 20 minutes a day just to connect and be mindful? Think about the natural environments around your home too. Your front yard, your backyard, your balcony, the local park. If you live in an apartment in the city, that's fine too. Let's bring some plants in. How many people brought plants into their home through COVID when we couldn't leave our homes? Bringing indoor plants in is a wonderful way to do nature connection and be able to tend to it daily. What kind of plants can you bring in? Peace lily is a great plant, aloe vera. Not only are plants great to look at aesthetically, but also they're great for purifying your air and having a healthy environment, healthy air to breathe in. Think about what plants you have already in your home and work environment. You have plants in your office. Can you bring plants into your office? What about pictures of nature on your wall? Just thinking about how we can bring nature inside as well. Through oil burning, candles, smell. You can even put YouTube on your TV and do nature sounds. There's so many great nature sounds on YouTube. You could work away with nature playing in the background. Just about using your creativity and imagination to bring nature inside when you can't always get out to nature. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you have, I'll stop sharing now. I hope you've been able to incorporate some nature-based interventions into your personal and professional practice.
Thank you so much, Kit. That's fantastic. I know you're open to questions, and I would like to invite anyone who would like to ask Kit a question about any of this presentation, or how you might be able to apply it, to either pop a question in the chat and she or I will read it out, or just put your hand up physically and it'll ask you to unmute if you have a question. So we've got a few minutes for questions, and then we're going to move into some breakout rooms before we finish off today.
Open to comments as well. People sharing their experiences in nature, or anything that stood out for you through those activities, any insights gained.
I think Sue Kim, did you have a question?
Yes, I'd like to know a little bit more about your course. Like when do you run it? Do you have to be present, or is it through Zoom, or yeah?
Yeah, look, I offer it in person in Victoria over 4 weekend residentials, but I also offer it via distance education where I post out the modules to the students. And then we do monthly Zoom. And we have weekly activities posted on a closed Facebook group. So it can be accessed by national and international students.
And Kit, if you provide me some contact details, I'm happy to circulate that to everybody today as well. So if anyone wants to follow Kit up, you can directly. Thanks for that great question, Sue Kim. I think there was a question in the chat that maybe might have just come back through. Kit, are you able to see the chat questions there? Or would you like me to read it out?
I can see, do you have any child-specific nature journaling prompts? That's a really great question. And the first thing that comes up in my gut is that children don't need prompts. I think children are very good at just connecting if you give them the space to do so. So I would just invite the child to play. And what I like to do, and I think this is with adult or children, and I know I do this with my own children, is I don't facilitate anything. Nature is co-facilitator. So we're just holding that safe space. So taking a child to a natural environment or being in a natural environment and just observing where the child goes and what the child does, that they will soon tune in and connect to whatever they need. I think if we prompt too much, we can intervene in the natural, authentic process of connection. I hope that answers your question.
I do have a question now. Caroline, do you see that there's any real, I mean, it's both nature between interacting with things that are dead as opposed to living, like interacting. I'm more involved with sort of expressive arts creatively, and as you were talking, I was thinking about, I'm bringing it down, a dish with like shells and rocks and things, coral, but they're mainly dead, and it just occurred to me, you know, how that you're interacting with things that are found, often the things that are dying, and you can reflect on that aspect of it. But I'm just wondering, have you had any research or know anything about interacting with live and dead type plant matter?
A really great question. And the first thing that comes to mind is the similarities between ourselves and our ancestors. That although they have passed in the physical world, they are still present in the spiritual world. And so when we connect to dead items that present dead in the physical world, which is washed up shells and potentially, you know, dead bark or trees, that there's a concept of them still being alive and still being present, because they are present in our spiritual. And that's a very big thing in Indigenous worldviews, is that there's not just the physical world that we're really living in. We're living in between two worlds. And so, you know, when things have washed up like that, I think they still have as much power and significance as something that might still be connected to the physical life force energy that is in the present moment. And so they still hold value and connection, much like our ancestors or family members that have passed, that they're still present.
Thank you.
I think there's some more in the chat. Leanne said, you have confirmed to me that I am on the right track without really planning it. I'm a counsellor, but wanted to add more to sessions. Self-awareness centre, mindfulness, wonderful. Yeah. It's great that you're intuitively feeling that you're on the right path. It is a very resourceful learning, indeed simple but powerful reminder of intuition. And I'm a former primary school environmental educator and now counsellor wanting to incorporate nature-based practices. I have a bit of boring practical question. How does taking clients out into nature impact on insurance? That's a really good question. So I have insurance for nature-based therapy, and anyone that is a nature-based therapist gets insurance once you join with IICT to practice nature-based therapy. So it really depends on risk. So it's really important with your insurance provider that you tell them exactly what activities you're doing. The activities that I do in nature-based therapy as a counsellor and social worker, I don't do adventure therapy. I don't take people out doing high-risk activities like abseiling and rock climbing, horse riding. A lot of those activities will require more insurance coverage. And so you just need to be I guess, open with your insurance provider what activities you're doing to make sure that you're covered. Very good question. If you're just doing some light, bush tracks and nature walks, doing nature-based mindfulness and journaling, and that's what I love about the work I do at nature-based therapy. It's very low risk and it's available for all abilities. So we really are able to keep within our insurance. People want to do more adventurous stuff, I'll refer them out to adventure therapists. I hope that answers your question. And Sarita has asked, could you please speak a bit more about how you've used herbal tea and indoor plants in your nature-based therapy? Has the main focus been on mindfulness? Yeah, great question. So it has been on mindfulness as well. So doing nature-based mindfulness and bringing nature-based mindfulness into practice and incorporating those things to connect to the sensory system when we're working indoors. But it's also important to create that biophilic design and that biophilic environment. So when a client walks into your therapeutic room indoors, they feel like they're walking into nature, because they're having that connection. They can see the plants, there's that visual, but you might have some, essential oils burning where they can smell nature, having those natural senses come through. So you don't necessarily have to do the nature-based mindfulness practice for clients to benefit from nature connection without doing mindfulness, because it's our biophilic design. We just automatically feel more relaxed and connected when we're connecting to nature.
Thanks so much for answering and responding to the questions and comments there. And there's been some great, really thoughtful, practical questions come through as well, which I really appreciate you all thinking about. Just got a few more slides to share before we give you the quiz link today. And that's just about some of our upcoming events. So now that we've had a chance to reflect a little with others and connect in, just wanted to share with you that we have a movement interventions for child counselling training coming up tomorrow, and that's with Dr. Robert Grant. That's for 3 hours. We've also got an engaging boys and young men in counselling, which is a fantastic dynamic 3-hour workshop with Professor Peter Mortola. That'll be next week for 3 hours. We've also got a free information evening coming up for our next intake for our graduate certificate in plain art therapy that I'm coordinating and running. And that's our July intake, the free information evening. That'll be the last one for the July intake for the year. That's Tuesday, the 13th of June. That's a 200-hour course that's all entirely online and provides eligibility for registration as a play therapist in Australia. If you want more information about that, just contact me directly. Natalie McKenzie, who's a fantastic drama therapist with us, is going to be doing a 3-hour training 16th of June. And we have another art therapy group starting again, which is super exciting, online with the wonderful Adana Dean, who's a psychologist and does a lot of creative work. She's based in Melbourne. This is a 5-week online group starting Monday, the 19th of June. So they're our upcoming events. Our next free event like this will be in July. That's the 31st of July from 10 to 11:15. And being an empath from survival to mastery is being run by none other than my own sister, who's quite an expert in this field. So I'm looking forward to hosting her and welcoming you back if you wanted to register for that one. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you could join me in thanking the lovely Kit Klein and her amazing expertise in this field. And I really hope that you can get out into nature and stuff. Thank you so much, Kit. Thank you, Ellie, for your support. And thank you all for listening on.